Welcome to part 2 of the Master Mode Whips Only challenge. In the last episode, we were able to conquer all of pre-hard mode using only 2 different whips, so make sure you check that out before watching part 2. I'll link it in the description. Anyways, today we're going to be attempting to finish this challenge, taking down the Moon Lord with only a whip as our main DPS. Will this be possible? Let's find out. With the Wall of Flesh defeated, I now had access to an abundance of things. Luckily, the wall dropped a new whip, the Firecracker. This small boost in damage made it ever so slightly easier to navigate the treacherous hard mode obstacles. With the Firecracker in hand, the first thing I needed to do was break some Crimson Altars to bring the hard mode ores into the world. After doing exactly this, I headed underground to do the age-old activity known as mining. My goal here was, unsurprisingly, to obtain the tier 3 ore, which in this world was titanium. I went through the standard process of gathering all the ores up, until I had finally gotten enough titanium to craft the armor. While I was mining, I stumbled across the underground Hallow, which consequently reminded me about a certain money glitch. I definitely did not perform this glitch at all, and did not buy all the potions I wanted afterwards with the money I gained from not performing this glitch. Whoa, look at all these potion effects! How did these get here? Anyways, even though I had enough titanium to craft the armor set, I was not going for the titanium armor set. Rather, I was going for the forbidden armor set. To obtain this, I needed to kill sand elementals, which spawn rarely in the desert during a sandstorm. So, over to the desert I went, with a bunch of sandstorm summons, and began the grind to get the needed forbidden fragments. For some reason, the sandstorms kept deciding to run away, which was really annoying, as I had to keep summoning the sandstorms back in. Eventually, a sand elemental had spawned. This fight was relatively easy to deal with. All I had to do was not stand in the sand tornado spinny things, and I would be fine. After a couple minutes, the sand elemental was no more, and I had obtained my first forbidden fragment. 1 of 3. Oh, wait. The operator sells them. How convenient. That saves a lot of time. I crafted up the forbidden armor set, and equipped it. To my surprise, this armor set gave me less damage than the obsidian armor set, which was slightly disappointing, but I still rocked with it because I was in desperate need for higher defense. Next on the agenda was to obtain a new whip. The Cool Whip.
Cool Whip? That's not how you're supposed to say it!
To do this, I needed to kill an ice golem, which rarely spawns in the ice biome during a blizzard. I went over to the ice biome, spawned in a blizzard, and ran around randomly, hoping an ice golem would spawn. After 5 minutes, I was beginning to get bored. Want a freaking goddamn ice golem? Ah. Lol, 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 lol. But luckily, an ice golem appeared, and I quickly took him down after somehow trapping him in this cave where he could not hit me. Awesome! Yay. Now all that was left to obtain was the Souls of Light and Night. Then I could craft the Cool Whip. I went to the underground Crimson first, and came across a Crimson Mimic. I thought that I might as well try and kill it, just in case it drops the Flesh Knuckles, which I could use. I ended up painstakingly defeating the Crimson Mimic, despite a severe lack of space. Unfortunately, it dropped the Dart Pistol, which last time I checked is not useful for a Whips Only playthrough, but at least I killed it, I guess. Then, I headed over to the underground Hallow for Souls of Light, where I stumbled across a Hallowed Mimic, and I decided to ignore it because I couldn't be bothered to kill it. I continued gathering the Souls of Light until I eventually got enough. I now had obtained the Cool Whip. What was cool about this whip was it actually summoned a summon when you hit things. Now, I am aware that a summon is not in fact a whip. However, the summon only appears while you hit things with the whip, so I'm not counting this as breaking the rules of the challenge. Anyways, it was definitely time for a wing upgrade because I was still using the blue horseshoe balloon, which was severely outdated at this point. I decided that the fairy wings would be the best choice here. So I went up into the sky where I farmed some Souls of Flight. With the Cool Whip summon and its piercing, the wyverns were surprisingly not a problem at all, and I quickly got all the materials to craft the fairy wings, and into the garbage the blue horseshoe balloon went. I decided to fight Crimson Mimics again, because I still needed the Flesh Knuckles to craft the Berserker's Glove. After a couple kills, I got bored and decided to try fighting Skeletron Prime instead. From the start, it didn't look like I had much of a chance. I was not doing nearly as much damage as I had hoped, and I was taking a pretty large amount of damage too. I even got down to as low as 60 HP, at which point I realized that the laser cannon was actually pretty low. I had to focus up. I kept my distance and tried to run away while keeping my Cool Whip summon active for as long as I could. I continued trying to take as little damage as possible, and eventually I had taken down the Prime Laser. This meant that there was 1, no more lasers, and 2, 1 less hand to dodge. This made it much easier to survive, so so I just ran around trying to stay alive and have my summons active at all times. Things started looking up, as all 3 remaining hands were pretty low, and Skeletron Prime was actually below half health. By this time, it was already past midnight, judging by the position of the moon, which was kind of worrying. The fight was no longer about whether I could kill him, rather whether I had enough time to kill him. But I was doing great, and it wasn't very long before all 4 hands had been taken down and it was just me and the head. Since the head had no projectiles, all I had to do was run away, securing me the first attempt victory on Master Mode Skeletron Prime using only a whip. Since Skeletron Prime dropped some hallowed bars, I was now able to craft my next whip, bringing me to the 6th whip out of the 9 in the game. This whip was the Durandal. Don't let its sword-like structure fool you, because it is in fact a whip. A whip that did a lot of damage, and also provided an attack speed buff similar to the one provided by the Snapthorn, which means that the Snapthorn was basically redundant at this point. I figured that the next boss to fight would be the Destroyer, because surely the Cool Whip summon would do great against a worm boss, with its insane piercing abilities. Out came the Destroyer, and I was in fact correct. The Cool Whip did pretty crazy damage to the boss as it rode down the worm's body, damaging every segment it went through. The only problem with this is, as far as I know, the more segments you hit on the worm, the more probes spawn. So by hitting so many segments, a lot of probes spawn. However, these were pretty easily dealt with the high damage of the Durandal. During this fight, I was unable to achieve victory because I was stupid and let the head hit me one too many times. I thought I would still try out the twins, just in case I could pull a Skeletron Prime and defeat it first try. I was not able to pull this off. While I did do pretty decently, I couldn't get away from Spasmatism fast enough during his second phase, causing me to die a very painful death. I decided to go back to attempting the Destroyer, because I felt more confident about defeating the Destroyer first. I just needed to avoid getting hit by the head. I just needed to keep an eye on the map to see where the Destroyer's head is, and if it was coming for me, I would dodge. This strategy worked flawlessly. But despite getting hit by the head, I was still able to take down the Destroyer using only whips. Before I went to fight the remaining mech boss, I wanted to get my hands on a set of hallowed armor, because I felt like I took too much damage from the twins. To do this, I had to go and defeat another mech boss. I decided that I would try and defeat Skeletron Prime again, considering how easy it was the first time. I was severely disappointed when I failed to defeat Skeletron Prime, even with the better whip. I only dealt like a quarter of his health before dying. I decided that I would fight the Destroyer again instead. And that was indeed a good idea, because I took him down for a second time, giving me the resources to craft myself a full set of hallowed armor. This gave me a whopping 1 defense more than my forbidden armor, and lost me summon damage too. It was not worth it, but I kept it on anyways because the immune time it gave after striking an enemy seemed decent. I have no idea how this works, but I used it anyway. Now it was time for the twins, so I went and summoned them in. My strategy here was pretty standard. I was focusing on dealing as much damage to Retinator as possible, while trying to dodge all the projectiles. Didn't look great at the start, but I was able to use a healing potion and recover. It was not long until I had reached near critical health yet again, but I kept my distance and dodged the projectiles, eventually gaining back my lost health. After a couple minutes, I had gotten Retinator into his second phase, which was not too difficult to dodge. I just kept my distance and dealt as much damage as possible, and before I knew it, it was just Spasmatism remaining. From here on in, it was pretty much a breeze. I mostly stayed on max health, but there were a couple moments toward the end where it started getting a little too close for comfort. Nevertheless, down went all 3 Master Mode mech bosses with only a whip. Next up, we have to take on Plantera. However, I did not feel ready for Plantera with this hallowed armor set, so I wanted to try and get the Squire armor set from the Tavern Keep. To do this, I had to fight the Old One's army to get 45 Defender medals total. After buying the Eternia Crystal and summoning in the event, I quickly realized that this event was way too difficult with only whips. The sheer number of enemies would very quickly overwhelm my puny whip, and would incinerate the crystal with ease, before I could even get a single Defender medal. I could not defend it for the life of me. I did some research and I found an overpowered exploit that stops the ground enemies from advancing towards the crystal. All you had to do was place a block, hammer it a couple of times, and block switch it with a platform, and voila! No ground enemies could get through. This worked exceptionally for the first wave or so, but then in came the Etherean Wyverns, which, since they were flying, did not get affected by my exploit, so they got quite a lot of damage off on the crystal because I still couldn't keep them at bay. If that wasn't enough, more Etherean goblins kept spawning. However, This time they had ranged attacks, which could damage the crystal from where they were getting stuck. This caused me to lose again, while only gaining like 3 defender medals. I eventually gave up on this. I just went and tried Plantera anyway without the Squire armor set. Plantera's phase was nothing much. I would just circle and circle Plantera, allowing me to easily dodge all the projectiles and take no damage at all. However, I quickly got Plantera into the second phase, and this meant that Plantera had all of her little snapper thingies that would damage me too. As I've done many times before, all I did was keep my distance and stay away from the little snappy guys, and all was good. I was dealing quite a lot of damage to Plantera, and dodging most of her attacks with ease. Towards the end, however, I got down quite low, so I decided to be a little bit more passive for a bit to hopefully regenerate some health. I got my health potion off, and down went Master Mode Plantera with only a whip. First try, might I add. With Plantera down, I could now get a new whip from the Post-Plantera dungeon. This whip is the Morning Star, dropped from the different armored bones with a 1% drop rate in Expert and Master Mode. So I ran around the dungeon, killing as many things as I could, before eventually, I got the Morning Star to drop. I then headed back to base, definitely on my own accord, and reforged my Morning Star to Legendary. With this new weapon, I tried again to defeat the old one's army. This time, I also moved the exploit platforms further back so that the ranged attacks couldn't reach the crystal. This worked exceptionally well, and I got to near the end of wave 7 before being taken down. And I also took down some ogres as well, giving me a lot of defender medals. I decided it was time to try Golem, because the old one's army was getting kinda boring, and killing Golem would unlock my final armor set, which is sold by the Tavern Keep. I headed down into the jungle temple to fight Golem. However, I had to kill this hallowed mimic first. Okay, done. Now it's time to fight Golem. Now, because I am stupid, I decided it was a great idea to summon Golem while I was still on 140 health. As you may have expected, I died very quickly, but actually did pretty decently for the circumstances, taking down almost a third of his health. Before heading back, I decided that I wanted to buy the Squire set still, because it gave a lot more defense than hallowed armor, provided a much better buff to summon damage, and also provided better health regen. After spending 45 of my 95 defender medals on that set, I headed back to the temple to take on Golem once again, this time making sure I was in a decent amount of health before starting the fight. The Golem fight started out pretty well. The Morning Star was able to hit both of his hands and his body all at once, dealing massive amounts of damage to them. After a little bit of dodging and weaving, both of his fists were down, and it was just his body before he entered the second phase. Again, this was just a matter of dodging and weaving, and occasionally swapping whips to the Durandal for the attack speed boost. And eventually, Golem's body was down, and now his head is flying around shooting lasers at me. Basically immediately, I got insanely low, and it was looking like I was about to die. My health potion was close to being off cooldown, so I just had to focus up, and take as little damage as possible. It was getting really close. Golem had very little health left, but so did I. I managed to get my health potion off, allowing me to go in for the final blow, taking down Master Mode Golem with only a whip. Now that Golem was defeated, I could now buy the Valhalla Knight armor set from the Tavern Keep, costing a whopping 150 defender medals total. However, I decided I want to try and get the Dark Harvest first, which was another whip dropped from the Pumpkin during a pumpkin moon. I summoned in the event and began whipping away at the early waves. Everything was going fine until the Morning Woods started spawning in. Yep, that's what they're called, don't cancel me please. These guys were incredibly annoying to kill, and would kill me over and over again. I decided against continuing the Pumpkin Moon event, and went to grind some more defender medals. The first couple waves went by no problem, but I soon realized my mistake. By killing Golem, the old one's army had been made more difficult, with new enemies with even more health than before. What I should have done is farm the defender medals before defeating Golem, when it was much easier to kill everything. But what is done, so I had to deal with the consequences. I soon realized that my main goal should be to kill the Dark Mages and Ogres, as they are the fastest way of obtaining the defender medals, as they drop defender medals when killed. The Ogre drops 20, and the Dark Mages drop 5, which is much more than the puny, 3 I get for completing these low level waves. It didn't take that much grinding before I had enough defender medals to buy the Valhalla Knight armor set, which was a great increase in all stats: defense, damage, and life regen. After upgrading my fairy wings to the steampunk wings, I decided that the next boss I was going to be going for was the Empress of Light. This was because she dropped the final whip in the game, the best whip. the Kaleidoscope, and that was what I would be needing to defeat the Moon Lord. So, I quickly built a relatively big arena, and summoned in the Empress. I quickly realized that she did a lot of damage to me, even with my high defense with the Valhalla Knight armor. What saved me numerous times though, was the incredibly overpowered life regen of the Valhalla Knight armor. If you ignore my low health for the majority of the fight, I was doing pretty well so far, and nearly had the Empress down into the second phase. Once she hit second phase though, things got way more intense, and it became increasingly difficult to dodge all of her attacks, and I eventually got hit by one of her dashes and died. However, I knew it was possible, so I went again, this time with better knowledge on how to dodge each attack. I'll spare you the details, but I got her down to 30k health, doing basically the same things I was doing in the first fight, just better. I didn't actually end up defeating her though, because I died. What I decided to do next was increase my health, because something had completely slipped my mind. I could use Life Fruit to increase my max health, bringing it to a total of 600 HP including buffs. I quickly went and did that, and re-attempted the Empress again. Nothing really changed, and I died yet again whilst bringing her down to 40k health, doing worse than my previous attempt somehow. I tried again, but only got her down to 45k health. I was just getting worse. Something had to change in my strategy. Then, I remembered about the Dark Harvest whip, and how I tried to get it earlier but failed. With my new armor, that event is likely going to be much easier, so I summoned in the Pumpkin Moon again and began whipping away at the enemies. I advanced to wave 10 pretty quickly, within a couple minutes, and that's when the pumpkins started spawning. To my absolute surprise, the first pumpkin I had killed dropped the Dark Harvest. I went back to base and turned the time to day to get rid of the event, but not before a wood guy came to get his final revenge. I went and reforged the Dark Harvest to Legendary, and then tried the Empress again using the Dark Harvest as my main weapon, because through a little bit of testing, it seemed to do more damage because of the higher attack speed. And when combined with the attack speed boost of the Durandal, it dealt crazy amounts of damage. I quickly made it into the second phase without much difficulty, and began focusing as much as I could on dodging the attacks, while staying close enough to deal as much damage as possible. If I got low, I would back off for a bit and let my health regenerate with the insane regen this armor gives. It was not long before I had made it into uncharted territory. I had made it further into the fight than I had ever before, and the pressure was on. I made it past 20k health, 10k health, before beginning to lose quite a lot of health myself. But I was so close. I decided to go in and deal as much damage as possible, hopefully to secure the win. As you would expect, this heavily backfired and I got extremely low again. I just needed to survive long enough to get my health potion off and finish off the Empress of Light. Master Mode Empress of Light had been successfully taken down with only whips, and was probably the most difficult fight of them all so far. Unfortunately, I did not get the Kaleidoscope from the treasure bag. Also, Editor Kiki here, I just realized I did that entire fight using an accessory that was for mining speed. Yeah, I beat the Empress of Light with whips without all my accessories. Just thought I'd let you know. I still had quite a lot of money from performing that not performing that glitch earlier. So I just bought the treasure bag from the operator until I got the Kaleidoscope and got the Empress wings too, which would be great for the Moonlord fight. Next on the list was the Lunatic Cultists, which should not be too hard with the Kaleidoscope. Over to the dungeon I went, where I brutally murdered the innocent cultists and summoned their leader. I used the Dark Harvest to gain the whip speed buff, and then used the Kaleidoscope for the main damage, and this did pretty great. Before I knew it, the Lunatic Cultist was incredibly low. I did manage to hit the wrong cultist though and summon the Phantasm Dragon, but that's nothing I couldn't deal with. It did not get close at all. I don't know what you were talking about. I took Master Mode Lunatic Cultist down first try with only whips, and now the Celestial Pillars were invading. With no more obvious upgrades to do, I just went straight for the pillars, starting with the Stardust Pillar, which I took down relatively quickly by letting the Stardust cells duplicate. Then, the Vortex Pillar was surprisingly not too bad with my infinite flight, only dying twice before taking down the pillar. Okay, maybe 3 times. My strategy of flying around no longer worked because of the fire worm guy that attacks you if you are in the air for more than a split second. so I had to stick to the ground, which would let me get hit much more often, meaning I died a couple times, but eventually I took it down, leaving just the nebula pillar remaining. This pillar was also quite annoying, but at least I could fly, so down went the nebula pillar, leaving the impending doom to approach. I headed back to my base and flew over to my Empress arena. And now it was time to wait for the impending doom. I began whipping away at the hands, but pretty quickly my health got absolutely melted and I ended up dying to one of the flying eyes. Despite dying quickly, it still felt pretty possible, so I crafted the Celestial Sigil and summoned in the Moonlord again, this time with slightly more knowledge on the attack patterns. I tried to focus the left hand until it was pretty low before switching to the right hand, so both of them would die at a similar time, making my life a bit easier. However, during one of his death lasers, I got stuck against a goddamn flying island and took a bunch of damage, and then proceeded to fly into another flying eye, killing him. This attempt was better, and I knew that it was definitely possible. I just needed to not get stuck in a flying island. I tried again, and again, got stuck at the top of the world, and died to his death laser. It was not going so well, but I was getting closer and closer with each attempt. I summoned him in again, and this time switched between focusing each eye so that all of them would be killed around the same time. This worked, and I was doing pretty well at dodging the attacks. Once all 3 eyes were down really low, I went in for the final kill on the eyes, leaving only the core. This was it, the final stretch. I got incredibly low from all the mini death lasers, but I kept moving right, and eventually gained enough distance between the eyes to dodge their mini death lasers. I got a health potion off and it was looking great. Just a couple more hits and... finally, the Master Mode Moonlord had been defeated with only whips. Honestly, this challenge was really fun, and it was actually a lot easier than I expected. It only took me 12 hours of playtime to actually complete this challenge. Whips did way more damage than I anticipated. I wonder if this could become a viable summoner subclass at some point in the future if they added more whips. Anyways, that is the end of this video, and the end of the series. Thank you for watching, and thank you for the insane support on the first part of this series. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and as always, I'll see you next time. See ya!